This is More Than Reality podcast, where we dive into all things faith, family, and marriage and share that there is so much more than the reality that you see on the surface. Welcome to More Than Reality with Adam and Danielle Busby.
I got braces.
Yep, that's a big one.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're just going to break the air and say, I'm a mom of 40 with braces and I look like my 13-year-old. Cheese. And it hurts. Yay, me.
All right, guys. Welcome to More Than Reality podcast with Adam and Danielle Busby. And so last 2 weeks, it was like the big Danielle saga. We've gone how we met, our engagement and wedding, learned a little bit about me, learned a lot about Danielle. Still
it was a little bit.
It was actually a little bit. And so, this week Danielle got braces.
Cheese. I look like Blake. Doesn't feel good.
Everybody says Blake is like the mirror image of Danielle.
I'm going to take a picture of me and Blake when she gets home from school. Both of us smiling with our braces.
No, it's like Danielle looks like Blake now.
It's wonderful.
I wouldn't even know what that feels like. Does it like bother your lips?
Yeah, I have like instant lip filler.
Yeah, it does look like your lips are kind of like...
That is a positive.
Yeah, it does push your lips out.
I have full lips now. But I don't have... She only did the top this week.
You're doing the bottom too?
Next week. Yeah, because I have an off bite.
Off bite?
Yeah, so like that's part of the problem. Like I can't bite right because my teeth are not in alignment.
I think mine just stay in alignment because I clench my jaws at night.
And you snore.
I say they have there's nowhere for my teeth to go because I'm like all night.
So what are we talking about today? Because that's boring.
Yeah. And so today we wanted to just kind of like continue the story. So we got you all the way to like us coming to Texas. And, you know, there's a lot that's happened in our life since we've been in Texas. Some of it you know about, some of it was covered on a TV
we
show.
Grew up,
there was a lot of
adulthoods here.
Yeah, there was a lot of life before the TV show. We were here for years before the actual TV show. And so we can kind of give the highlights of just like what happened, what transpired, like what we did for work, what we came over here for, what you were doing, what I was doing. And then fertility issues kicked in.
Okay, so got married in 2006, July 2006, moved here to Texas like January, February 2007. So we were a fairly new married couple, moved to a city in a different state for a job that Adam got. And there was, nobody around that we knew. My sister Ashley and her husband Nick lived in Houston, but in like Post Oak downtown, like Houston. And we are in the outside, closer to the bay in League City. So if you wanted to see each other, you had to really do it on the weekend or you had to plan it out because, they were working, everybody's working and no one wants to drive into the city if they don't have to all the time. So we'd see them on the weekends occasionally, but,
So it was just us and our two dogs.
Our two dogs.
We were living in an apartment.
Because we came over one weekend. We're like, oh, because you actually had already started the job.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, we'd like to have you over here, like on the daily schedule, I guess you could say, by X date or something. And so we picked one weekend, came down here and just started looking at
apartment blitz all around the lake.
And that was my first time actually being to this location. Never had been down here before. And
so we're like in South Houston, there's a big lake. It's called Clear Lake. On one side of the lake is NASA Johnson Space Center. And so we actually looked at some houses over there. Our main headquarters apartments at the time. Our main headquarters for our company was in a town called Seabrook.
Yeah.
And so it was like at the bottom of the lake, right at the mouth of the Galveston Bay, right by Kemah. And so, and then you have this big, if you're looking at me on YouTube, like our office was here, then the lake was all up here, NASA's right here, and like Webster, Clear Lake, League City. And so we're just trying to figure out
not how I would have done that.
What area around the vicinity of this.
Yeah, we knew this is where your office was going to be, which little did we know you would never have to work out of that office.
That's fair. Rarely there.
But so we looked around the lake at different apartments one weekend, and literally we didn't really know what the best areas were, like what's good around here. We just kind of pulled up around different apartments. Didn't have a realtor or nothing. Just like came down here for a weekend to look.
Like, oh, there's an apartment pulled in.
Yeah, I think we stayed with Ashton and Nick like at their house or apartment at the time in Houston, and then we came down here for the weekend, like looked at apartments and then went back up there with them. But then we went back to Lake Charles, that Sunday, and that next weekend, like we literally moved here. Or I guess we found an apartment that same weekend. Mm-hmm. We ended up having to find an apartment, but then we moved in like that next weekend. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think you were already working here. I don't know if you were just staying with Nick or them. I don't remember those days, but, came down one weekend, found an apartment. Pretty much the next weekend we moved.
Yeah. And actually Danielle you worked with us for a little bit. You were kind of doing like personal assistant stuff. You're doing some like admin stuff for a company for a little bit.
Yeah, because you had moved here, and that company was fairly small at the time, and I was helping your boss and admin and just doing whatever because I didn't know anybody. I didn't have anything to do. But that didn't happen until like later on in the year. Like when we first moved here, it was like settled in an apartment, moved in, and literally like that next month, Adam got this account. I guess you call it account. What do you call it? Yeah. Account in a town called Beaumont, which is basically between League City and Lake Charles, but on the closer side of Lake Charles.
Yeah.
Side.
And so then what's funny is like, so I moved Danielle here and then
he moved to Beaumont.
Like 3 months after we moved here, I landed a big contract. Me and Nick landed a big contract in Beaumont, Texas, and it was a turnaround project. So
first experience of
it was like a 3 to 4 month long project, and that I was having to pretty much live in Beaumont for that entire time. So I was living out of a hotel, and
I'm living here
and Danielle
by myself with the dogs.
Is over here by herself, doesn't know a soul, and is just mad. Because I moved her 3 hours away from home, and then I'm working 45 minutes from home. So like I could have easily just kind of commuted that had I had known.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Or even if we would have known, we wouldn't have moved yet because you could have still been in a hotel in Beaumont, and I could have just still been in Lake Charles where everybody we knew. I would have had some form of community, but I didn't know anybody. And so it was just me and the 2 dogs and our apartment. And I just kind of started to figure out, well, I guess I need to learn this town. So I'd get out and instead of looking at maps or phone, I literally would drive somewhere, or I would say hey, where's Target? And I would make myself get to Target and then remember how to get back. I don't know. It's this is how I'm going to learn everything around the lake. As you look back and you're like, oh, why did we move to League City at that time frame? Well, at that point, we knew we had to be in League City for work. Didn't know that he was going to get a job contract for this big turnaround, which for people who don't know what a turnaround is, from my understanding is, let me try.
Okay, here we go.
It's part of the refinery that they tear down to rebuild. and they bring other people on site to help with that project.
Yeah, pretty much. Like that's the gist of it for sure.
And then you would give them walkie-talkies.
So an oil refinery, obviously they have all these different processing plants, these different areas in the plant where they further refine and break down and make byproducts or make products with byproducts and all this kind of stuff of like oil or gas or whatever, natural gas and all those things. I think mostly oil. It's just all byproducts of oil. And they turn it into all kind of different stuff. But every one of these processing units, it requires, some of them, they're on a turnaround schedule. So they're on a schedule of every few years. Some of them, maybe 5-6 years. Some of them maybe 2 or 3, just depending on the unit and like what the wear and tear is on the unit. And so it has to be pretty much not torn down, but like broken down and overhauled, change out like a lot of the internal components and then rebuilt as fast as possible, because whenever those units are down, they're not making any money. So all these contractors come in and they bring in anywhere from 500 to 2,000 extra workers, and they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They get this unit down and back up as fast as humanly possible. And so that's a turnaround. And so what we would do at the time, our company was like a communications company. And so we provided two-way radios to all these refinery workers that needed to communicate while they're in the facility. And then we further kind of nailed down and created some technology and developed some of our own products that allowed the refineries to be able, actually the contractors to be able to communicate with the refineries on key channels that are on the main refinery system, but also receive the emergency announcements for the refinery. And so we kind of had a little niche in the market, and we did really well. And so we did that for many, many years. Worked in ExxonMobil and Marathon Petroleum and Shell, and you name it. I was in a bunch of places, a lot of places I just did not like to be in, because we were in the middle of, I had been in some refineries that had gone through like fires and explosions and stuff while I was inside, and I was just always uneasy about being in there. So even though, it's very rare to get injured in there, but it can always happen.
Yeah.
So
now that we all know what a turnaround is and that we care about it. So yeah, we went through that first turnaround phase where he was out of town and I was just here. So I wouldn't be able to see him. I really barely even talk to you, honestly, because one, you started this new job, you're working around the clock, you're living in a hotel. It just was a weird beginning of a marriage where it's like, hey, we just got married. We moved here, but I'm actually over here working and you're over here stuck by yourself.
And during the day, whenever I was in the refinery working, I was like in an explosion-proof bunker.
Yeah.
So no cell service.
Yeah. So there was a lot of times I'm trying to figure out this town. I wasn't working. I wasn't in school. I had no job. I'm just literally had just moved here. So I would get bills paid. I'd take the dogs and I'd go back to Lake Charles for a couple days and then come back. And, I was like, I'm a married woman. I'm not just going to be bouncing around friends' houses in Lake Charles or family and staying there. But I would try to see Adam going through Beaumont if I could catch him on a lunch or whatever. But it was never a set schedule of if someone needed communications or this was happening, he was always on call in a sense.
Yeah.
So that was very challenging. And then after a while, I did start helping around that company with errands or whatever it was. So then slowly actually was I need to find a job. I need to do something. So I started working at a pediatrician, internal medicine's office, just in the front desk. Office manager, wasn't the manager. I can't even remember what I did but I basically worked at the you check in and did insurance billing and like all that kind of stuff. Which was a fun job and the good people. And so that got me out of the house and, getting to know people. I don't know. And then I think whenever like that turnaround ended and you were just like that business and stuff was just getting busier and busier. And then next thing you know, you're on another turnaround and it's like, oh, here we go. And so not until you really got through that phase, I'll say like we lived here for probably a good year until we were like, felt like wait, we lived together. It was really weird being in that apartment. It was really small, like 1-bedroom apartment. What was it, like 700 square feet or something like that? It was small. And I wouldn't say like we really started to like have life and community here till at least a year afterwards.
Yeah, because I was just so disconnected. Because you were just here by yourself.
And so like we really didn't have like much of a marriage, I would say, because we weren't really seeing each other. Communication was extra difficult. It was just me and the dogs a lot. And so like whenever you were back home and moving in, I was like, there is no room for you here. This place is way too small. It is not fit for 2 people and 2 dogs. And at the time, our dogs were a Boston Terrier, Maggie, which was our first dog that we talked about in our episodes prior.
And a big white boxer.
And then a big white boxer named Zoe, which was like the best dog ever. But we got her when we were engaged, getting married. Little did we know we'd be moving into a little apartment and have this big white boxer. But yeah, so it was me and the dogs. And when you would come home to the apartment, I was just like, oh my God, there's no room for you. Like that can't fit you anywhere. So speed up that kind of life. I mean, I worked over at the pediatrician's office for, I don't even know, like year and a half, 2 years. It had to have been a while because we then, when you would be kind of home, we were like, when we were together, it was like, we need to find community. Like we need to get involved in church. Like we weren't connected in any aspect. We had found a church back in Louisiana in a college ministry that we were loving. And it's this small church. And we're like, we just need to get back into something like that. We need to find a church. Yeah. We started going to Clear Creek Community Church is where we first landed. And it was a bigger church.
Yeah. Way bigger than what we were used to, for sure.
What we were used to. What happened from that point on? Like, so we get involved in the church and we keep hearing a lot about get connected in a small group, get connected in a small group. Still to this day, we still believe in getting connected in small groups because that's where you can find your people. And it took a little bit of time to get like connected in the right group where we felt like it was right. But within there, like, Adam's still working the same job, same type of schedule where you learn like these busy seasons of turnarounds to then the rest of it's just a sales job, like you're sales and you're playing golf and you're taking people out to lunch and whatever. So that was kind of like what your atmosphere of work was like. Mm-hmm. And I was still working in the pediatrician's office, but when we got connected into our first small group, there was some people in there that kind of got me connected into more of like a career like aspect of work that I ended up in that kind of consultant petrochemical like world that we live down here by all the refineries. Mm-hmm. So yeah, one couple introduced me into an opportunity for an interview with this consulting firm. And so I got a job in there and then kind of grew within that company and then started, I was always a consultant working for BP and did that for years and kind of worked my way in different fields from starting with learning how databases to websites to then registrations and pamphlets and training and organizing programs and schedules and people.
But then you eventually ended up doing like mid-level management training. And so
But that
BP was a worldwide company. And so they would have to strategically place these training seminars or whatever, these training things in different places around the world.
Hubs, yeah.
And so Danielle and her team would actually have to travel here and do all the logistics for it and plan it and run it.
And every training program would start about 6 months prior to planning.
Yeah.
So you're constantly working on multiple training programs, but also, a lot of them were based in Houston because there was, a hub here or whatnot. And so that's where it all kind of started. And then it kind of took off, and then we would travel to different places around the world where different hubs were, so it was an incredible job. Got to do a lot of traveling. I never had really international traveled or whatever. And it was a good experience. And I would say that really kind of started where you were growing in your career. I'm kind of feel like I'm in a path of like a career phase. We are outgrowing this apartment that we lived in for, at this point, we're probably in it for like 2 years. And we're like, it's time to like have a house. Like, let's start looking for our first house. So we did that. We wanted to start a family. We're married.
Once we got our first house, then we're like, okay, this is like a place where this is our home base.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just an apartment or whatever. Like, we have a house now. Like,
this is probably 2-3 years into marriage. Like, we're like, our lease is going to end. Do we want a bigger apartment? Not really. When you think about like rent and, cost of things and what living and whatever. So got to the point where we wanted to look for a house. We were just looking at, built homes that were used homes. And then there was a newer neighborhood coming up and they had some really great incentives. So financially, it was just kind of making, more sense financially for us to take advantage of like these incentive things for building a home. And so we ended up choosing to build our first home. It's just a 3-bedroom, great little starter home.
Like 1,700 square foot house.
3-bedroom, just us and the 2 dogs.
If you saw the first season of Outdaughter, that was the house.
Yeah, that was the house. That was our first home. At that time, we've got a house. We both got jobs we love. And my job at that point hadn't really been taking off around the world. It was just into the city. And I would go for 7 days for this program at a hotel, all these things. Then, fast forward that story, jobs, you got your house, you got your dogs. It's like, let's have a family.
Yeah.
So that's where I guess we started to face the first kind of like trial of like our life together of like, what is, having a family. We always knew we wanted to have kids, always had like these feelings of like being gifted with children and connected with children, and they would love us. And, we talked about in the past, like, I would babysit and Adam come with me and we'd play with the kids and all this stuff. And so we just felt this is the time, like everything's kind of lining up in our eyes and,
in our eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. In our eyes, like seriously, like in our eyes, like work wise. And if we plan this and this time and this schedule and like, we're going to get this and plan around a turnaround and like all these things.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, like, I guess you're just young and naive and you just don't think about like, you just think about the things that you want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily think about, okay, well, what if there's a problem with that?
We didn't. We never even crossed our mind.
Like, what if you can't get pregnant so easily? And that's whenever like we realized that we were struggling and nothing was happening.
A year into it.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, what's going on?
Still not happening. Like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And so that put us down a road of, luckily Danielle's OB doctor was also specialized in fertility. And so
that was a little bit easy transition.
But he was somewhat conservative with the fact that like he's not even going to have the conversation unless you've been trying for at least a year or something like that. So like we went through that whole year of trying and then we're like, we're still not getting pregnant. And so then that started the whole process of fertility.
All right. Well, let's assess things. Let's see where things are. Let's get Adam tested. Let's get me tested of whatever aspect that meant. But at that time, my doctor knew me, but it's not like he knew Adam. It's not like a gynecologist would ever see Adam.
hope not. I had no reason to ever see him.
Yeah. And so he was like, let's go ahead and send him to a urologist. Diddle daddle.
Oh, that was, I mean, for any man that's ever gone through like fertility issues, and I mean, that is a experience for sure. I mean, especially you get a fond appreciation of like what a woman actually goes through with like gynecologist and all this kind of stuff, and just like very intimate settings. and it was wild. Definitely eye-opening.
Let's talk about it.
The doctor that I went to, he was actually at a teaching hospital here in Houston.
So wait.
Because Houston's actually a massive medical district, one of the largest medical centers in the country. And so there's tons of hospitals that are teaching hospitals.
Yeah. What? So at this time, doctor has done ultrasounds and things with me to kind of like see like what all I've been tracking with my cycle, and it's not very consistent. There is really no rhythm, and how do we know when we're ovulating and all these things? But also wanted to like test Adam's like sperm count and motility and like all these things. So that meant go to the urologist, and yes, so there's a lot of medical doctors around. There was
like one of those things like you don't really think about. So the doctor's like, oh yeah, we're gonna like need to test like your numbers and like your sperm count and stuff. And you really don't think about what that entails until you get there. And then you're like, oh, what you actually have to do in order to give them that. And how just like how very personal that is.
Which I love this story.
Of a thing inside of a doctor's office of people that you don't know that don't.
Well, let's also talk about like, at that age, you were like 26, 27 years old.
Yeah.
Something like that. So you're pretty young. I mean, we got married at 22, 23 years old. So we were married like, I was like, I want to have a kid by 25. And okay, so we would start trying around that age maybe. Mm-hmm. Actually, how old is Blake? 13? Yeah, so I had her at 27. So we started around 25. So when he gets to the urologist, I did not go the first time with him. I was like, dude, I've been to this doctor. I've been going for these for years. You should have been going and getting yourself checked up. So I will say to fellow listeners, like if you are getting married and whatnot, like I would say like, let's just get ourselves checked out. Like, and so you don't.
No guy is just going to like, oh, let me go to the doctor and see what my sperm count is before I get married. That's not realistic. You don't do that unless you have issues. Unless like you're like not getting pregnant.
Like
that's just not something that guys just like, oh, let's go freaking give my semen sample to the.
I didn't say like before you get married, but I'm saying if you're going to get married, if you're engaged and you are like, people are waiting later in life to get older. They're getting older to get married. And so I would say like, I don't know. I mean, people talk about like this and women talk about this, like getting older, like find someone like, I don't know. I would say like, if I have to go to the doctor regularly, like, why are you not going to the doctor regularly?
So dudes should be going and like posting up their stats.
They need to go to their checkup every year, just like women do. And just like we bring our kids to
Match.com. Hey, here's my sperm and motility rate, girls. Ready to go. Super fertile, guys.
No, but all I'm saying is like, stay up with your, like when was the last time when we were married all those years, I never once knew that you went to a doctor. So this is what I'm saying. Like women, to my head, most women go to their yearly checkup and it's not comfortable. They get examined and it's uncomfortable. Men should also be going to their men's checkup once a year. And you were not doing that.
Because I'm a perfectly healthy specimen.
Until we
I never got sick ever.
It didn't matter. That had nothing to do with it. You also chose really bad decisions when you were growing up and when we met each other that could have affected things in this aspect. So like I'm saying, like if you like, I'm just saying before you want to start the journey to have kids, be on a healthy route. like, do your best to be on a healthy route and get yourself checked out once a year. Like, that's all it is.
Okay.
Because at that point, you're like, didn't know what this was going to feel like or what it was going to be like.
Didn't know what it was going to feel like?
You didn't know what it was going to, you just said you didn't know what that appointment was going to be like.
For sure. Until like,
okay. Cold hands.
Cold hands, for sure. Cold hands. And also,
a bunch of cold hands.
It was a doctor that was
a
teaching doctor, because he's very good at what he does. But also everywhere he went, everywhere he went, he had students with him. And so he came into my room and he's like, okay, drop your pants. And this isn't just guys. It's like guys and girls, you know, some of them younger than me.
And cute.
Some of them are pretty attractive girls. And here I am dropping my pants in this office with like probably 6 students in there with the doctor.
Did you do helicopter?
And he would like go down. Danielle.
Every man that's going to listen to this knows what that is. And every wife or woman who knows what that is. Because it's so annoying. Come on.
Oh, wow. Okay. But anyway, the doctor like, you know, goes down and he does like his check and his assessment. They're laughing with me. He's like, you know, he's like kind of feeling around. And then he gets up and he like writes some notes. And then he turns to the next student and he's like, okay, now you do it. And I'm like, I mean, mind you, this doctor is not cheap. And I don't think he was even covered under insurance.
He wasn't then, yeah.
And it was crazy. So like he was like one of the most expensive doctors to go see. And yet he was using this as like to teach his students. So he's like profiting both ways. Like, I think, in my opinion, I think if you're going to be a teaching hospital, that you're actually actively teaching students in the room with the patient probably shouldn't need to pay.
Well, you could have
like
said no.
You should need to pay the patient. Like if you're wanting to use that patient to like train other people how to do their job. I don't know. I thought that was like really weird. Like, so this is like super expensive for me. And yet like I'm going through like all this extra crap. Extra fondling. I don't know. It was weird. And then after that, and then they give you a cup and a stack of magazines.
Ew, did you touch those magazines? Don't answer that.
And then they said, hit the button, it'll turn on a light in the hallway when you're done. And they walked out. And then, so you got to give your sample. And I went there month after month after month through the whole fertility process.
But talk about pressing the button.
What do you mean?
You'd say, he would say, I didn't want to press the button too soon, or I didn't want to take too long. So it's like, when do you press the button?
Yeah, so you like wait around and read a few articles.
Read the articles in the magazines.
Probably the most like nerve-wracking, embarrassing one was the very first time that I ever did it. It was at your hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't know, like your doctor needed me to go down and do a sample the very first time.
I don't know if that was the first time. It just was the first time there.
It was like the very first time, just so they could see like my baseline. I think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Before you went and saw the urologist.
And so in your doctor's office, the hospital.
Well, not in his office. It was in like a urology.
Like they sent me down, Danielle's upstairs or whatever. They send me down to the first floor. And it's this like inconspicuous door in this hallway. You open it up and it's just like this empty hallway. At the end of the hallway, about 30 feet ahead of you, there is a little barn door, like a one of those like where it's like split in the middle and like the bottom of it's closed and it's like a little ledge where you can write. And then there's 2 doors in that hallway. And those 2 doors are like each room has like a table, a chair, and like a little armoire. And then inside that armoire is like a little DVD player with like a bunch of porno DVDs just to get you going. And so
keep telling the story.
First time that I went, I mean, this is like so
humiliating,
humiliating, out of your comfort zone. This hallway, you know, it's like hard
the only
floors.
People that are in there all doing the same thing.
Yeah, they're all doing the same thing. So everybody knows what you're doing. And so like it's all hard floors. Everything echoes. And so you're in there. And so like I like turn the DVD player on, like that whoever had been in there before me must have been like fiddling with the DVDs or something. And so like it was just this like it was like this DVD player that was like mounted in this thing with a little screen built into it. And so whenever I hit on, the DVD was inside of it, and it wasn't like pressed down onto the little turntable. And so the second I hit on, the DVD just started like going and like making all this noise. And I'm like trying to stop it. Like, oh God, I don't want them to know what I'm doing in here or trying to do.
I don't
like,
know what I'm doing.
I don't know. Here. Like it was my very first time. And so it was super embarrassing. And so then you get out there and they're just like looking at you weird because like, what was all that noise you were making in there? It sounded like a Thumper, like the rabbit from Bambi.
Stop it. Feels good.
So many months of those types of experiences. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
There was a couple times that you came with me, which was
one time,
which was obviously made the experience better, even though it was still awkward because it's like your wife's in there with me and they know
I didn't know if I was supposed to stay in there or not.
Like, okay, you're staying in here. Well, are you going to go walk out into the waiting room while I'm here in there?
Okay. Your children might hear this. Yes. So those were good, humiliating experiences for Adam.
But that day that Danielle was with me, it was funny because the office that we were in was like had a window outside, and there was obviously it was a commercial building with like mirrored windows, so people outside couldn't see in. But it was just funny because there was construction going on in the building right on.
I love how you remember these details.
Right beside it. And so there's all these construction workers literally right outside the window as Danielle is inside the office helping me give my sample.
No.
Helping me get the demons out.
Dude, no. I couldn't help.
That was perfectly fine. Why can't I say that? You gotta get them demons out.
Okay.
That's what we call it.
Okay. What's his face on Housewives?
You gotta exorcise them demons.
Stop it. Jeez, man. What's his name?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Teresa's brother. That's all he used to say.
Joe?
Yeah, he would always talk about, yes, he would always say that. Love me some Housewives though. Anyways. So yeah, that was months of Adam getting humiliated, which was fine because
Which was fine.
I mean, I had it way worse.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't really complain too much. It was just like,
no, you never can complain actually.
Like just laughable. I mean, that you're actually like having to go through this and like.
But in the moment, listen, the realness of it, we can joke about it and laugh about it now, as we have our 6 kids. But the real side of that is that in that time frame, like we're going through something that we have no information on.
Yeah.
We know no one who can relate to it. We have no one to talk to. We're embarrassed. We're struggling to have kids. Like, how did you even talk about that? Like, that was hard. And
you're a fairly newly married couple too.
Yeah,
and so
we're
like
5 years in.
You would have never thought that you would have these kind of problems, and all of a sudden here we are, and
it's just hard to talk about.
You don't know how to deal with it. Yeah, it's something that you're a little bit ashamed of, because like this should be normal, like for me to be able to get pregnant.
Yeah. And at this time, your sisters.
And then it goes on for so long that like you get into this like weird, weighty, like you go through seasons of blaming yourself. You go through seasons of blaming your wife. You go through just like, you're just frustrated. Like, why? This is something that we wanted for so long. Like, why, God, is this not, are you not giving us this? Or why are you not allowing us to have the one thing that everyone around us sees as a gift of ours, of just being like gifted with like kids, and like, man, like y'all are going to be awesome parents one day and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you find out you can't. And that is what like was the most probably hard through it all, was just the struggle.
Like you're going and praying for a family. And, you know, at this point in my walk, it's like I knew who Jesus was, and we'd been going to church. We'd been involved in small group. I was not like a complete saved Christian at the time, but I knew who Jesus was, and I was in the midst of walking into like solidifying my life to Jesus, I guess. But the same time, you know, we're in that phase of life where both of our sisters are having children. Everyone around us is having children. And here we are feeling like the outcast of like, we can't have children. We are suffering inside. We don't have anybody we feel like we can talk to. We don't know anybody who can relate. We're feeling ashamed for whatever aspect.
At the time, we didn't know anyone.
We just feel isolated, and like everything's out to get us in a sense. Like we're getting attacked, like is what we feel like. So it's really, really challenging to walk that season of life and just feeling alone, you know, just really feeling alone. And yeah, I mean, it was weeks after months of appointments and ultrasounds and fondling appointments with the urologist. You know, just, I mean, it was just months and months.
Because like whenever they would go through, like on my side of it, in order to make any sort of little change with like my sperm count, or I don't think you could really do anything about motility. It was just, it is what it is. But like trying to raise sperm count and stuff like that. And they would like try different drugs or different dosages of drugs. But because of the way that like that is produced in your body or whatever, you would start taking a new dosage of medication, and it would take 2 months
before you would see effects
a change. And so it's like, and so just imagine how long that process was. Like you would change something, and then it'll be like 2 months down the road of just trying and doing other things. And then, okay, like that didn't work. Like let's increase the dose. So it was a long process, but you know, finally we got pregnant.
But I think we're going to stop here on the infertility side of that right there, because there's a whole story in the midst of that as far as testimony.
Okay.
So I would love to just kind of like end on, you know, infertility, and just lead into the next episode with what came from the infertility of that first trial. So I think, you know, those of you listening that are going through infertility or have walked the infertility life, like you instantly can connect with someone who has gone through similar experiences and understand it. And I feel like at the time we were going through it, there was nobody we knew to talk to, or how to talk to, or how to even just discuss it or talk about it. Yeah. But there's actually was people around that we didn't know until after they had their kids, that they were like, you know, we were walking through a season of this and that. And so I would just encourage you to share with someone that is, you know, of a wise mind headspace, I would say.
I feel like it is probably, I don't know.
It's more common
a lot
than you
more
think.
Common nowadays. I feel like just more and more people are having problems getting pregnant for whatever reason. It's probably all the crap we're eating, or just like all the crap we're exposed to nowadays. Yeah. It's just, crazy.
But there are resources
and yeah, I mean, we found after, going through it, and obviously once you're in it, you kind of are able to talk about it more freely. And then you start
or
realizing
once you've overcame it, I would say.
God puts people in your paths that, can benefit from your story. And God, would bring people like to us that would find out that we're going through this, and then they would kind of lean on us and ask us questions and stuff. And we would see those as, God moments of like, God sending us this person because like, here we are, we've been through this, we've struggled with this. So like, how can we encourage and help this person? Even though we're going through some pretty tough stuff at the time as well. So, I mean, and that's one thing that we want to, just convey in this podcast is we all have a story. We're all going through ups and downs, good and bad, but there's something in our story that can help minister to someone else. And we can all learn from someone else around us. And, the benefit of just sharing your story and being willing to talk with people and open up to people. And even though it may be hard, that your story, no matter if it's something that you just feel is insignificant, someone could learn from.
Yeah. And listen, God's created us for community. So, which means do not walk through something alone. There is people and there are people around. Even if you feel isolated, there's tons of groups, even socially, Facebook, whatnot, that you can get connected with. Obviously, I would reach out to whoever you feel is closest to your heart and share whatever you're struggling with. In this case, we're talking about infertility, but there's lots of resources. I mean, like Hand to Hold is a nonprofit organization that we have supported for years. They help with infertility, bereavement, and also like NICU care. And so that's a resource. They have podcasts, they have chat groups, they have people to walk life with you in those seasons. So definitely encourage any of you that are going through any of those things to reach out to them, but also send us messages, send us questions. We're happy to answer those and chat about that. It is something that it was a very extreme hard time in our life, but that was also 13 to 15 years ago. And we have learned a lot from that season. And so happy to talk more details about that if people have questions about that. So,
I mean, we don't want this just to be a community about us just talking to a microphone or a camera. We want this to be a community of like, how can we help each other? How can we have a dialogue back and forth? How can you guys help each other? And so, that's just one aspect that can make this community strong is engaging, sending messages, writing reviews. We're going to leave links to voicemail box where you can actually like leave a voicemail. So we can actually, if it comes down to it, we can actually play your story or play your voice on our podcast and we can kind of communicate to you through there. So it is some pretty cool opportunities. And so, so thank you guys for listening.
Hope you enjoyed a little bit of our story, a little bit deeper story, walking through infertility. And we will continue this story on in the next episode. Thanks for listening and watching. Cheese.